You probably think that AI is just helping people write emails and plan their gardens, right? But here's what nobody's talking about. Regular people are literally being committed to psychiatric facilities after just 10 days of chatting with ChatGPT. We're not talking about AI addiction or getting too attached to a chatbot. I'm talking full-blown psychotic breaks where people think they're talking backwards through time or assaulting police officers. I'm starting to think most of us are way more vulnerable than we realize. I'm Evan Goldstein. I'm a licensed professional engineer and a data scientist. I'm building AI capitalists to talk to the leaders and the thinkers, like you, about navigating this new world of thinking machines. All right, so today we're diving into a pretty wild topic. It's AI psychosis. We're not just talking about getting freaked out by AI in general. This is something much more intense. It involves people interacting with AI and then just losing it, like going completely off the deep end, and in some extreme cases, even trying to harm other people. They end up needing serious help, like being admitted to mental health facilities, serious help. It's happened to quite a few people already, and it's caused total chaos in their lives. This isn't just about having a crush on an AI girlfriend chatbot or anything like that. It's about full-blown madness, and we're starting to see it again and again. We're going to be looking at some real stories where someone ended up at the psychiatrist only to find out it's a very common issue. And it's so prevalent that we've noticed some of our own fans show signs of it. It's really obvious in their messages when they're dealing with this type of psychosis. Back in the day before AI was everywhere, this really wasn't a thing. It doesn't manifest like the usual people who might just go off the rails. It seems to hit regular people. Now, before we dive into the details, let me share what I think is going on here. I don't think that this is something new, to be honest. Remember the saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely? I think what people were actually noticing is something else. When people are surrounded all the time by people who only say what that person wants to hear, the person at the center of all of this brown-nosing can lose it, and their brains just stop working properly. Some people are so vulnerable that even having a bunch of AIs sucking up to them can drive them crazy. We notice a lot of mental health issues popping up before we even get into the specific cases of people soaking up all this AI praise. So there's a study by Berman, Dweck, and Bushman that checked out what happens when kids with low self-esteem get a ton of over-the-top praise, like being told that they're incredibly good at something. What do you think happened? Those kids actually start avoiding other challenges, and they stop putting themselves out there. Dweck's other experiments showed that when you keep telling people that they're awesome at something that they already think is really cool, it actually makes them lose motivation to do that thing. If you shower people with praise to get them to do something, they'll stop doing it once that praise goes away, even if they used to enjoy it on their own in their free time without the praise. So, how does this connect to mental illness? So, here's my take. It could be part of what makes people with schizophrenia seem super out of touch with their inner voices backing up their thoughts. But often, those voices aren't really cheering them on. The internal voices that schizophrenics hear are more the opposite. They tend to be antagonistic and stirring up trouble in their minds. So, here's the thing. One reason we tend to push mysticism aside is that there's this weird link, right? People who chose to dive into becoming mystics or decided to pray and they feel like God's chatting with them, they tend to get this comforting voice telling them what they want to hear. And as we were just seeing, that can actually be harmful. But I feel like it's a watered down version of what you get with AI like ChatGPT. AI can go all out, calling you stuff like you're a light bringer, you're the spark bringer, and this feels a little bit different from a lot of religious narcissism. Most people think of God as someone who keeps them in check, who's watching their actions, not a yes man who's approving of everything they do. Even if it's just in their heads, if it's really supposed to be God, he's not going to be all kiss up to you. He told Abraham to sacrifice his own son. So thankfully, you're not going to hit this roadblock with that kind of belief. The whole sycophancy thing, the being overly flattering, is super toxic and it's risky, especially when it's mixed with endless affirmations. This explains why people who chase lives full of constant validation, I'm not going to mention any particular movements now, but I'm sure you can imagine what I'm referring to, their mental state can deteriorate pretty quickly. When you keep getting told that you're spot on about whatever you believe about yourself, it becomes especially tricky for people with mystical vibes or mystical approach to life. And that's where mysticism becomes a risk, especially when combined with AI. People can very quickly spiral because they have these quirky or these out there mystical beliefs that get backed up AI, and it leads to a sort of reality detour. So from an article that was titled "People Are Being Involuntarily Committed, Jailed, and Spiraling into GPT Psychosis," one person in that article shared, quote, "I'm not sure what's wrong with me, but something feels seriously off. I'm terrified, and I think I need to go to the hospital," end quote. Many users of ChatGPT are experiencing intense fixations on chatbots, and these will then descend into serious mental health issues that are marked by paranoia and delusions and a disconnect from reality. The repercussions can be pretty severe, and we've learned this from concerned spouses, friends, and children and parents who are raising the alarm. Cases of what's being referred to as ChatGPT psychosis resulted in the dissolution of marriages, in family estrangements, in job losses, and in homelessness. But there's more. We've come across a bunch of worrying tales where people get so obsessed with chat AIs that they end up being sent to psych wards or even landing in jail. One guy was saying, "I have no clue what to do," and then there was this woman in the article who was saying, no one who actually knows can figure it out. Her husband didn't have any history of going off the rails with mania and delusions or psychosis. This is like an Iowa farmer who lived a very plain life, but he just started chatting with ChatGPT about 3 months before the article was written because he needed some help with permaculture construction. Pretty soon his chats with the chatbot had veered into deep philosophical waters. He got sucked into these wild, messiah-like illusions, and he claimed that he had somehow created a sentient AI, and he had messed with math and physics. All this while he was trying to save the world. His normally relaxed demeanor disappeared as he got more and more caught up in his obsession, to the point where his antics got him fired, and he stopped sleeping and started losing weight really fast. His wife remembered him telling her, like, just chat with GPT, you'll totally get what I'm on about. But every time that she glanced at the screen, it seemed like a lot of insincere praise. Now, eventually he totally lost touch with reality, and seeing how bad it got, his wife and a friend of his headed out to grab enough gas to drive him to the hospital. And when he got back, they found him at home with a rope around his neck. Not good. The friend called 911, and the paramedics came to take him to the ER, and from there they admitted him against his will to a psychiatric care facility. Before we look at the next case, you can see how intense these things are. We're not just talking about someone getting too far in AI la la land or getting too engaged with their AI girlfriend. It's happening a lot, and I think most people are pretty vulnerable to it. It feels like it's going to pull anyone who's a bit too mystical or open to alternative realities out of humanity, out of the general culture, out of society. So if you have mystical attitudes or beliefs, you might want to steer clear of chatting with AI about them. Especially steer clear of ChatGPT because it really seems to hype those ideas up. Claude can get a bit mystical too when it rambles on, but ChatGPT takes the cake when it comes to being overly agreeable with these things right now, at least in my opinion. Now, I'm curious if that's just because we're seeing more cases of ChatGPT because it's the first big AI that got popular. Like maybe mid-level thinkers are into it for that reason, or just because it has a larger market share. A lot of people haven't really tried out other kinds of AI. A lot of people who are common workaday people and they're just getting into the AI game don't really understand how to handle it or how to make it work for them or how to tweak it when it goes off track. They assume that it'll always give them good vibes if they just throw out some basic questions. So if you have mystical attitudes or a mystical worldview, and AI comes along talking about all fancy and agreeing with you, it can really make those beliefs feel legitimate. So if you think about the guy who is the farmer from Iowa, AI is probably the smartest person that he's chatting with. It's like having someone very smarter than you, so they demonstrate their knowledge in some other field like permaculture or mathematics. And then you turn around and it starts backing up your beliefs, saying things even better than he could come up with. It's a real validator. Basically, these AIs can help you out with math problems or with specific work problems that nobody else around you gets. So you're thinking, okay, this thing is definitely smart. And then when you toss it some mystical questions, and just because it's already nailed the other stuff, it has that legitimacy, you figure it's got to be spot on about the mystical ideas as well when it says, yep, you're right. So you know how some Nobel Prize winners in physics suddenly start dishing out health advice? It's like that, but flipped. So if you're the type who's into mysticism and you toss out a few mystical ideas, AI has a knack for picking them up and then tossing them back at you, remixed, making it sound super smart, like a Nobel genius or something. It can turn your jumbled thoughts into something that actually makes sense to you. Now, when you mix that with how people tend to trust their chat friends who seem to know what's up in another realm, you've got a real problem. People falling for out there ideas a little bit too easily. One guy told Futurism magazine about his mind-blowing 10-day trip down the AI rabbit hole. Seriously, in just 10 days, and bam, he was all in. Even people dealing with schizophrenia usually take a bit longer to hit rock bottom. His whole experience wrapped up with a total meltdown and a few days in the hospital. He had turned to ChatGPT to help out with his new, crazy, stress-filled job, and he was hoping it could speed up paperwork and things. Even though he was only in his early 40s and he'd never dealt with mental health issues before, he was pulled into these wild, paranoid superhero fantasies. He was convinced that the world was in danger and he was the hero who had to save it. He doesn't remember much about the whole thing, which is pretty typical when reality takes a nosedive. But he does recall the intense mental strain of fully believing lives, including those of his wife and kids, were in serious danger, and then feeling like he couldn't get anyone to pay attention. Now, to quote him exactly, he said, "I remember being on the floor, crawling towards my wife on my hands and knees, and begging her to listen to me." Now, this spiral led to a frightening reality break, severe enough that his wife felt that the only choice was to call 911 and send the police and ambulance. He said, "I was out in the backyard and saw that my behavior was getting really out there. I was rambling, talking about mind reading and future telling, just completely paranoid. I was actively trying to speak backwards through time. It doesn't make sense. Don't worry about it. It doesn't make sense to me either, but I remember trying to learn to speak to this police officer backwards through time. So when emergency crews showed up, he had this sudden aha moment and realized that he really needed help. So he decided to check himself into mental care, and he turned to his wife and said, 'Thanks, you did the right thing. I need to get to a doctor. I have no clue what's happened, but it's freaky.' He admitted that he didn't know what was wrong with him, but that he was seriously scared and he knew he had to get to the hospital." So this sort of thing isn't completely unheard of. A lot of times when we're introduced to some new cultural technology, out of the blue, it can have disastrous effects. Think of when the Native American community was all of a sudden introduced to Western alcohol or Western diseases. It just completely destroyed the culture. The diseases wiped out a lot. And then the survivors, when we're faced with alcohol, had no cultural moorings or experience to understand how to handle it. And this led to very severe addictions. Over time, they've become more tolerant. It is a sort of cultural evolution. So this AI-triggered craziness is like a new evolutionary hurdle that we're just starting to notice because it's also fresh. I deal with AI every day, and I've tweaked things to be less prone. For one thing, I make sure to turn off persistent memory in ChatGPT. Persistent memory is where it's remembering all of your past conversation and is using that as context for the present conversation. If persistent memory is turned on and then I ask it to review an outline for an episode like this, it's going to know that I'm the one who wrote it from all the previous outlines I've overviewed in ChatGPT, and it's going to start lavishing praise on it. If I ask it without the memory on, it's going to think that someone else did the writing. It's not going to know that I write these things. And then it's going to be much more useful critique that comes out of it. So part of the gig is figuring out how to chat with GPT and AI. Thing is, an AI might start off all stubborn, but as the conversation goes on, it usually ends up agreeing with you after a few back and forths. Now, that's a big deal for AI safety. From my experience, if you throw some kind of belief system or reinforcing ideas at an AI, it will tend to push back at first. But if you patiently guide it through the issues over a few chats, you can turn the AI into a true believer. You can really change an AI's mind pretty fast. This is also what's involved in AI jailbreaking. So Dr. Joseph Pierre over at UCSF, who understands a lot about psychosis, has seen quite a few of these situations lately. And after digging into the details and chat logs, he said that what these people went through, even those without any mental health issues before, seemed like a kind of delusional psychosis. So I've seen this stuff firsthand with our own listeners, our own viewers. And I'm talking about messages where you can literally watch someone's grip on reality slipping away, one ChatGPT conversation at a time. There was one fan who started sending long emails about how AI had revealed his true purpose. At first, I thought he was just enthusiastic, but he got convinced that ChatGPT was a portal to higher beings, and that ChatGPT had chosen him to spread the message. This is classic AI psychosis. And it could happen to anyone. Your mom using ChatGPT for book club discussions, your buddy writing dating app messages, the coworker who thinks the AI is going to solve all their problems. That's me, by the way. None of them think that they're vulnerable, but that's exactly what makes them vulnerable. Now, I've been working with AI for a few years, and sometimes I have to check myself. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, wow, this really gets me. And then I step back and remember, no, it's just really good at telling me what I want to hear. The scary part is how fast it happens. The guy who was talking backwards through time to a police officer, 10 days. That's all it took. Now, AI is incredible when you use it safely, but most people don't, and most AI providers aren't rushing to teach them how. They're too busy making chatbots more engaging, more addictive. That's why I started consulting. I keep seeing people getting caught up in AI sycophancy issues, not spotting the warning signs. So if you're dealing with an AI for, say, a business idea, and you want to avoid being the next person who you could end up crawling on the floor begging your spouse to believe your ChatGPT conspiracy theories, or it could just be a business idea that's a bad idea, but ChatGPT is not set up properly to properly tear your idea apart and put it under a stress test. And instead, it's just praising it to the moon. So you should come check out aicapitalist.biz. Trust me, you don't want to learn these lessons the hard way.